and afternoon, and welcome to the Outsourcing Edge. Today, we're going to talk to the very lovely Kiarah. Thank you so much for joining us, Kiarah. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks so much for having me, Emily.
It's an absolute pleasure. So, remind me, how long have you been working for Living Redefined now?
So actually this is my going into my second year now, which has flown by so unbelievably fast. And yeah, it's just been a really, really good year and a bit.
Time just goes so fast, doesn't it?
Really, yeah.
And I think if you're in the right environment as well, it's just fun and it flies. So tell me, before we met and before you started working with Living Redefined through remote recruitment, what were you doing? Tell us a bit about you and what you were doing.
So very similar sector as Living Redefined in terms of being in accommodation, but also very different as it was more so luxury accommodation, more so with short-term rentals, so Airbnb sort of accommodation, and ultimately just managing those guest communications, the guest experience, and people really going in and out, any maintenance issues. And yeah, it was a good environment. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I guess I was just seeking something a little bit different, and moving into Living Redefined obviously is more in social housing and a lot more impactful. And yeah, so that move seemed like a good shift, and good motivation as well.
Fantastic. And in your previous job, were you in the office or were you remote as well?
So it was also remote. There were opportunities because there was a South African team to be in the office at certain stages, but also primarily remote. So I was quite comfortable. I think my entire working career, to be fair, has always pretty much been a remote environment. But it is also interesting how when you're working for the right place, sometimes working remote can be a very different experience from job to job. And I feel like it's had a positive experience, like you've said, when you're working for the right place remotely. So yeah.
So how many jobs have you had working for people remotely? Just the
Um,
two?
my entire my entire professional career. So I would say three, including Living Redefined. And yeah, it's interesting because I think when I started working out of university, that was peak COVID, and so naturally everyone is moving towards a remote position. And once you get comfortable in it, it is difficult to go back into even you know a half and half sort of environment in the office or remote. And I just love working remotely, to be fair.
So, having had three different jobs working remotely with three different styles, what would you say were the successful ingredients for a successful work remotely? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I guess the misconception I find a lot with working remotely is that everyone thinks it naturally means you're very secluded, you're sort of isolated, and that can a lot of people can see that as a negative, and that's the reason why I think when you work for a good company and you have good company culture, naturally you can actually collaborate so much more than you do sometimes in an office by having those conversations, whether it's through Slack, Teams, even if it's a video call. And so I think really having positive relationships and just being really like quite close with the people you work with creates a flexibility and sort of just a fun environment where you have trust in each other that you're going to work well, even though you're not necessarily face to face. And I've enjoyed in the last three jobs, I would say, I feel like that working remote and those people relationships have just gotten stronger and stronger, that it just has made me feel so much more comfortable being in my own space, but not feeling secluded, just feeling like I can log in, have a conversation, and it just feels like you are in person, like that body language, the energy is there. And so yeah, I think that for me, I've always had a positive relationship with working remotely. And I would say, in terms of those ingredients, it's definitely your colleagues that make a massive difference in that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, with a work environment, everybody's got to be responsible for making that environment happen. What would you say what did you bring? What have you brought to the table? Dreadful question, but yeah, sounds like an interview, but yeah. You're not being interviewed, Kiarah, I promise.
I know. Wow, back to the beginning. But no, truly, I think you are obviously what you make of any position. And of course, with being in a remote environment, you do, to a certain extent, you know, your physical presence is not there as you would be in an office to necessarily be forced to facilitate conversations, and whether that's work related or even if it's just team building. I think with coming into a remote environment, you have to really put your best foot forward and also just be yourself, but be open to getting to know people in a way where often it's a deeper connection because all you're doing is you're communicating rather than just necessarily being in a physical environment and, you know, being in a co-work space. So I think you do need to be very open, and a good sense of humor helps a lot, breaks the ice a lot, helps keeps things flowing. And I think it just creates a fun environment where you feel like you're not necessarily always sitting behind a screen, which ironically you're doing a lot more than you would be doing in a physical environment. But it just feels like it's a lot more conversational, like I said, collaborative. So yeah, being open and just yeah, having good communication is obviously the root of really, really good remote work. Which I think is a positive that a lot of people don't necessarily always think about when you think working remotely.
It's true, and I also work remotely, and I feel
Mhm.
opposite than lonely because I speak to so many people every day. It's almost you want to get rid of all the people. I've never had so many people in my life being on my own. It's bizarre, isn't it? Now you're in I understand an interesting position. You're going to meet your founder next week.
Yeah.
Is it next week?
Yes, next week he's coming. So Ollie is the CEO, and he's coming through to Cape Town, which I've been plotting this for the longest time. So I'm very happy that he's finally coming. But again, this is something where I think for a lot of people, when you work remotely with people, you might almost get the scaries, or you might feel like, what's it going to be like to meet someone? Like, is the energy different? But I think when you have a very strong relationship, and sort of, I feel like with Ollie and I, obviously, I sort of know what he's vice versa, and that's purely because we communicate quite well with each other. And so I feel like being in person won't be difficult. It will just be like natural because we've got such a good communication structure. But definitely very exciting. It will be interesting to be able to actually work together since we spend most of the day talking over the phone. So yeah.
I think when you meet somebody that you've had such a great relationship with, it's the personal side. You don't physical side. You don't know if he's tall, but you don't know how they fill a room. They're all those details that you miss. And I'm coming out in October, and I can't wait to meet my team because similar
No,
thing, lots of communication. But I've never actually been in the same room with anybody, and I speak to these guys more than I speak to my own mother. It's so bizarre.
and I think with working remotely, for me, I mean, I could say to Ollie, it's a great excuse to employ remotely, and then you have an excuse to travel and to visit. So I think that that's great. Yeah.
It's definitely something that I always encourage all our clients to do is to come out, absolutely amazing people. But yes, come to South Africa. So what are you going to do with Ollie while he's
Oh,
visiting?
I mean, there's obviously just the bucket list things that he has to do when he's in Cape Town. But I mean, I think some good co-working, you know, just like one-on-one, and obviously we also have Sasha, who's in our team here from Cape Town, and so it'll be nice for the three of us to really just spend some time together working, get some good ideas flowing will be nice. But I'm sure there'll definitely be some touristy things that I'll push him to do as well because it's only natural. I'm just excited for him to be in the sun, since most of the time I hear that it's not that the weather is
It's a
our
bit grim.
big one.
It's a bit grim. Now, I had the pleasure of meeting, well, I've met Ollie a few times, but we were in Marrakesh recently at the same time randomly, so as you know, so it's always fun to see people in different environments. Now, that sounds really exciting. So you're going to be able to do co-work together for the first time.
Yeah.
That's really exciting. Ollie is a fascinating person because he actually really doesn't believe in the remote work environment at all. And is really passionate about the in-office experience, yet he's got a team of fantastic people in South Africa. So how do you integrate with the UK team?
Honestly, I mean, we have I would say definitely, I mean, using Slack as internal communications is just so instant. So whether it's constantly, it's a small question or it's a meeting, we're always huddling each other or calling each other, and that kind of creates that instant sense as if you were in an office, and if you had a question for your colleague, you would go up to them and ask. And so a lot of the time, instead of emailing back and forth or texting back and forth, we jump on a huddle, we have a conversation, or we jump on a Teams or even a WhatsApp call. And I think that just allows us to, there's no miscommunication, there's no difference in tone, or it's just a really quick and easy way, and it feels like you're having that personal conversation when you actually are so far apart. And that has been the constant way of communication with Living Redefined, and I think that's the reason why we feel like we all know each other so well in the team. And it's really positive. I mean, even for people working in an office environment, I feel like sometimes we speak maybe more than people would if they were in the same workspace. So that's really positive.
How do you, when you're dealing with humans, where there's always can be some conflict or disagreement, how have you, not just in this position, but in previous positions, handled that in a remote setting? Because that can be complicated.
Yep, of course. I think generally in terms of conflict, like obviously each person has their own style and what they prefer to do. I think as you go on in different jobs, now mature a little more and you become a little bit more aware of how or what's the best way to deal with things. For me personally, honestly, it's to usually step aside for a little bit and allow things to relax itself, because most of the time, and this is the difficulty when you are communicating through text rather than actually having a conversation, it can be, the tone can be way off and people can misinterpret. So I think stepping back is definitely a good way to allow everyone to see full perspective of what's actually going on. But I will be honest, and that's just not me painting a great picture. We've in the time that I've worked here, a year and a bit, we truly have not had any situation, and it could just be because everyone is very relaxed in the company. Everyone's just like, we have such clear, good communication that we just generally don't have conflict, which I know seems crazy and is so like, that's exactly what you want to say, but it is truly the way it is. And I think that's purely because of the way we communicate and how in touch we are with each other, I think. Yeah.
But that's wonderful to hear. You're obviously very much in the right place for you and for the team. It's right, because building a team is actually about having the right people, isn't it? Because if you have the wrong people, it just doesn't work. So it really, really works. So that's exciting. So what's next for you? What are you doing at the moment in the company, and what's your career path within the company, if you're allowed to say?
So at the moment, I mean, we are obviously going through a bit of a transition in terms of our clients and trying to onboard new people, and that's really, really exciting for us because the dynamic from last year, we got into quite a good process, and now obviously having anything new is a little bit daunting. But I feel like with Living Redefined, especially, and this is the reason why there's constant motivation, I feel, in this role, is just because unlike most other roles, from day to day, although every job has a process and naturally you have a routine, I feel like there's been so many different points where I've constantly been challenged. And Ollie's always there to obviously ask questions, but it is sometimes really, really great being young and being in a role where you sort of just get pushed in the deep end a little bit. It just helps you grow, you figure things out on your own. And so I feel like right now we are experiencing a lot of challenges, but positive ones that are allowing us to sort of swim on our own a little bit. And that's really exciting. In terms of career path, I'm a very, very relaxed person. I think, like you said, when you're in the right place and you feel good and you're actually enjoying it and the time is flying by, often you just keep going and you don't necessarily always look back and see how far or how much you've grown. And honestly, if I do look back and actually critically look at how well things have gone, I can see how we started off really just me and Ollie. And then in the last year, we've gone and we've had a team. I've headed up my own team within Living Redefined. And it's very rewarding and it's exciting to see that we've created something really, really strong. So I can't exactly say where it's going. And I kind of like that because it's something new, something different, and a different challenge that could hopefully just take us in a completely different path that I can't anticipate, which I wouldn't have previously thought was exciting, because sometimes there's comfort in knowing what's coming next. But I think that is really, it's really lighting a fire under me, if I could say that.
That's so exciting, because actually in the right place, work doesn't feel like work, does it? It's a joy a joy to do. And it sounds like where you're at the moment.
Absolutely,
So
that's correct.
it's going to be really exciting to watch your progress, because I know Ollie speaks so highly of you, and you really are a very important, instrumental part of the business. And I think if you left, it would fall to pieces. How do you keep you? I really do. How do you keep your relationship with Ollie and other key stakeholders strong? What would you say your top advice would be to other people working remotely?
Um, I think if you get lucky, and this is just being point blank, like if you get lucky and you do get to work with someone where you can have open and very honest communication. I mean, you know, Ollie, he's very to the point, and that is just it's the best way where you don't have conflict or there's no reading between the lines, because he's so frank, and I feel like it's created an environment where I can also, and I'm sure you've seen in our dynamic, I can very much give it back to him, where I can just be very frank with him. And that's in a professional sense, where we can really say, this is how I honestly feel about this situation or this particular circumstance that we have. And I think it's a mutual agreement between us, and even with other people. To be fair, we have an honest environment where if something doesn't work, no one is really afraid to object to it or to give their thoughts. And so I think a really really big part. And again, if you get lucky, and part of that is also when you start something, to come into it and be as honest and truthful as yourself as possible. It sets the tone for other people you work with to also feel a bit more comfortable to be themselves and to really be honest. And then what happens is you create this constant environment where every conversation is just no nonsense. It's kind of just to the point. This is how I feel. This is what works. This is what doesn't work. And I think there's a growing respect that comes from that as well, between you, your boss, your colleagues, where everyone just feels like, right, we're moving in the right direction because we're just being honest. So yeah, I think that's really really important, to come as yourself, and not feel afraid, because yeah, that
Not
is.
feel afraid. That's an important one. Not feel afraid. What would be your top piece of advice for somebody considering working remotely for an international company?
um Honestly, I would say it's great, because you have your I mean, my advice would probably be, I think for a lot of people who are looking for remote jobs, often when you scroll through a website or you scroll through LinkedIn, you just see the idea that you're kind of contributing, but you're not fully contributing. And I think for some people um, that can be appealing, but I think that that's a misconception, and people need to understand that if you are seeking something remote, you are still very much involved. You are still a very integral part of an entire operation. And so I think that you should see it as, if you are applying for something in office where you fully need to be functional and present, and I think that that is, yeah, that's exactly what you should be seeking out of that job role. Um and um hmm what else would I say that I've looked for? um yeah, I think a lot of the time when you are looking at a job role that's remote, you often don't think that people culture is important, because you see yourself as something separate. But I think you should really hold that very very valuable, because ultimately that will be your motivation. When you are working remotely and you're working so far away from people, you do need something that's going to make you feel like, right, I want to clock in, I want to log in. And so ultimately, understanding how the company works, what do they do, asking the right questions as well in those interviews, those first interviews, because it is a mutual agreement. And I think with a lot of people, they go into, when you're seeking a job, you go into something and you need something and you're trying to put your best foot forward, but at the same time you also really need to think about, does this work for me? Am I going to be
It's
motivated?
important.
Do I actually like these people? Do I like the sector as much, or is it just a remote job to me? So I think that these
Yes.
are really things, that people need to still really hold quite tight while you seeking that job. Yeah.
No, great advice. Now, I only ever saw you in one set of interviews, because yeah, you came for one set of interviews and you got the job and lived happily ever after. What would you say your key takeaways on how to prepare for an interview?
Do you know that, again, unpopular opinion here, because I feel like a lot of times when I've done interviews in the past, obviously some light reading is always, always good just to understand what you're going into. But that's not even, I would say, preparation. That's really to understand if the job role is something you'd be interested in, if the company's goals and their objectives are something that you can get behind, because ultimately that's where you're putting most of your time in the day. Um, but if I'm very honest, the job interview that I did with Living Redefined, which, as you said, was such a quick process. It was one and done, and it was fantastic, because I think previously I had done interviews, and it was at least like 6 interviews for one job role, and you sort of, when you're already losing motivation in the interview process, you know, it's probably not right for you. Um, but I think understanding the company, asking the right questions, but not putting so much pressure on yourself when you go into that interview, for example, and feel like it's very conversational. You're asking questions, the employer's asking questions, you getting to know each other. I think that when there is that, just you going off the top of your head, what you feel is right, things are flowing, that's when I think, you know, you're making good progress and you're making the right choice. So I'll be very honest, when it comes to Living Redefined and having my interview, I probably didn't prep as much as I would have usually for other things. And I think that that's kind of great, because it pays off. You come to the interview as yourself. You feel more confident. You're not going always towards a script and towards things that you sort of have a checklist where you're like, I should ask this and I should ask this. I think as you're talking, that will sort of come up.
That's
And
that's really really valuable advice. Thank you, Kiarah. That's really good. So, big question: when are you coming to the UK? When's Ollie buying you
this
your
is
plane
great.
ticket? We've got to put it on here so he can hear it. Hold him to it.
All right, okay, let's do it now. I've been asked this question plenty times, and I fear I haven't given a strong answer, but I don't doubt, Emily, now that Ollie's on the horizon next week, straight after going to be my turn. So it will be in the near future, I'm sure. I think he'll definitely have this one over my head once he's been here and he's visited. It will very much be, when are you coming now? It's your turn. So he'll be on the horizon in the near future. But for now, just very excited to have him in our territory, to be fair, in our good weather and
Well,
our yeah.
look after him, keep him safe, and show him the best of South Africa. I can't wait to hear it, because I have no doubt he's going to come back as an expert on South Africa
Oh,
and tell me all.
my dear Emily, you know it too well. World traveler, Ollie. Love it.
Kiarah, thank you so much for your time today. You've given some really valuable insights, and it's wonderful to hear your story. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much. And that's all for us today on the Outsourcing Edge. Thank you very much, and tune in for the next episode with various links in the bio. Speak soon. Thanks so much, Kiarah. You're a legend.